Yo, 95% Rookie here. This is probably going to be a bit of a shorter video, but I'm basically just going to go over some updates to the Rallypoint script that I've done. So I'm going to have two parts in this. I'll kind of separate them, but first part is going to be on the changes I've made to my general mission structure for the Rallypoint with the ACE system using the ACE mod. So the only mods for this would be CBA, ACE, and 3DIN Enhanced. And then the second part will be without ACE. I've kind of modified the script so that it works with using just a regular Arma 3 action. So you can skip to that if you want. But first off, I'm going to go into the game. I'll probably be editing this around a bit depending on how much useless stuff there is. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is load the mission here. So I have 95 setup mission, which is the with ACE version. Open that. So first thing I've changed, I've kind of changed my structure a little bit. So inside this mission file, which I will include in the description, I have this, which I have set up actually as a I set it up as a composition. So I made a composition using, you can just make this, right click, save custom composition, and now so whenever I make a mission, I place this down and then just modify it as needed. So I'll go over the markers and stuff before I go over the scripting involved. So first off, headless client HC1. This isn't needed if you don't use a headless client, but I always like to have this included in case I decide to run one. Depending on mission setup, it'll utilize that differently. Next up, game master with hashtag admin logged and all add-ons. That basically just enables a Zeus for whoever the admin is, which is, kind of a fail safe. And also, if you're running a Zeus mission, then yeah, you want that. Next up is Rallypoint, which I have right now. It's respawn east. There's other ways you can do this. You can also make this invisible by using an empty marker and the markers tab. Respawn east, this will be for op4 east, or the red guys, Russians, CSAT, stuff like that. You can change it to west. You can change it to gorilla, spelled like that, and it'll change the side. Side note: this rally point is involved in the in the script. So if you were to change, say, to the blue 4 team, you would have to change this to respawn west, and you would have to also modify the rally point anywhere the rally point east is mentioned in the scripts. You would have to go in there and change rally point east to rally point west, so it's referencing the correct marker. Same thing with here. Right now I have this labeled as player base, which would work fine because there's only one player base. But if you were to rename this marker, you would have to update that in the script. So just keep that in mind. Here we have Rallypoint 1. By the way, it's really pretty easy to modify this base script. Like, I worked from this, and I basically I got a basic script going from some example, and then I kind of modified it a lot. So there's a lot you can do if you just kind of ease your way into it. I've also found ChatGPT to be pretty useful as far as learning scripting a little. Like, not learning, because it's important to keep in mind if you're using ChatGPT to script, it makes a lot of mistakes. So basically you're going to want to make sure that you are double checking what it writes, because it'll just make up values and syntax and stuff. So you're going to want to double check it, but it is still a very useful tool for getting at least the base structure of a script going. You may have to modify it, you may have to completely rewrite certain parts, but I'd say use it in the micro level. Like, if you're writing an individual little part of a script, ChatGPT works fine for the most part. Don't ask it to write me a full script on something, because you'll run into a lot of problems that way. Anyways, that's just a side note on ChatGPT. But anyways, RP1, I have this as a ammo box. You can basically use any object named RP1. It'll teleport. Basically, what happens when you run the script, it'll teleport this RP1 to your the player position. Speaking of which, we will place down a op4 unit. I was making an op4 mission, that's why these are op4, but you can obviously change this to whatever you want as long as you change the name of the respawn marker and all that. So we're going to name this Persist1. The reason why it's named Persist1 is because there's a mod called Persist RCO by Remy, which is a really good persistent mission mod. I use that, and the main player needs to be named Persist1. So that's kind of the class name or the variable name I use for the squad leader, the main squad leader. You can obviously change this to whatever you want as long as you're editing in the script where it mentions Persist1. So that's kind of a general note. So that's everything. That is everything I need for the basic setup here, because I've moved the trigger system, which will the overrun Rallypoint system to the actual script. So I'm gonna switch over to my screen that will show the actual file structure, and I'll show you what I did in there with the notepad and all that. All right, so I'm on my desktop here, or my desktop view. So within this mission folder, I'll try to keep everything within this crop I have going on, because I have some other stuff going on that I don't want you to see. But anyways, so this is the mission script folder. I'll kind of go over everything here, because this is kind of a replacement for my last one. There are some interesting things in that you can, but the Rallypoint system and stuff has been revamped, essentially. So this is kind of a replacement for the last Rallypoint video. So on player respawn, this will delete the previous corpse once they respawn, their old corpse. Init server, nothing's really changed here. This is the AI skill. If you want a more like a more in-depth explanation of this stuff, you can probably go to the last video. Init player local. So this is where a lot of stuff has changed. So within ACE, this is what the stuff within ACE. So I'm gonna go over this one by one. So this right here, this is, I may have had this in the last one. This is a unconscious marker. One key thing I've adjusted here is I've added this right here. Create 3D marker, which I've modified a lot based on using the ChatGPT, which has helped me out with this. I did have to find out how to call a variable name with an if, modifier or whatever. So essentially what this does with what I've added into this, so this will make up a 2D marker on the map whenever a player goes ACE unconscious. What this 3D marker does, so private 3D marker. So this is a 3D marker variable only available in this script. So it will create vehicle on the position of the player, which is running the script, which is unconscious, essentially. So when the player goes unconscious, it will create vehicle, which is an object, sign arrow large F, which is a 3D object, essentially, that looks like an arrow. It's used in VR. It's kind of gaudy, but so there are ways, I'm sure you could figure out how to do better ways than this. This is like what ChatGPT gave me, and I think it's good enough. So it's essentially a big 3D arrow over top of a wounded player. There are some caveats to this, because I've attempted to make it so only medics can see this arrow. I'm not sure if I succeeded at that, because I was having issues with it in testing, but I may have fixed that. If not, everyone will see this marker. So if either everyone or no one, ideally it would only be the medics who see this marker, but I'm still working on that, essentially. May figure out how to do that. So it'll attach the 3D marker to the player 2 meters above the player. So that's self-explanatory. This next one will hide object true. So ideally what this will do is when this is created, it will automatically hide the object, meaning anyone who runs this script will not see the object. But if vehicle variable name player in brackets MD1, MD2, meaning medic roles. So for example, let me just go back to this. If I place down a combat lifesaver, and this will be my medic, I will name my medic roles MD1 and MD2 based on however many medics you want, or obviously you can scale this up however much you want. So MD1 and MD2. So now, ideally, the way this will work is the marker is currently invisible, right? But it will check if the player's name or the variable name of the player is MD1 or MD2, meaning they are the medic, then the 3D marker hide object will be false, meaning the marker will be visible. So ideally it's hidden. Unless you're the medic, then it is not hidden. Now, I thought I did this earlier, but I've changed it a bit. I've moved a 3D hide object true out of the else variable, or the else modifier for this. So instead of if player MD1 to else hide object true, I've just moved this ahead and kind of bypassed this. So hopefully that will fix it. I was having issues before in this where no matter what, everyone saw it despite the hide object true. So we'll see how that works. My other guess would be, if this doesn't work, is that this is calling globally, that this is calling hide object false globally once the medic activates that, which that would make sense to me. As far as how to fix that, maybe there's a modifier like only run this hide object command if you are the medic. So not sure exactly how to fix that. Anyways, so ideally that will create a 3D marker that will then be hidden if you're the medic. If not, it'll just create a 3D marker that's visible to everyone, and you can delete that part if you want. So you just delete this whole the whole part with the 3D marker. Other than that, Ace Unconscious, it'll delete the 3D. Oh, this right here will delete the 3D marker. If null 3D marker, then delete. So marker. So yeah, essentially it will delete the 3D marker when the player is no longer unconscious. So, okay, yeah. So this next part here. So these ones here up until this if variable name one. These will, what they will do, you can obviously modify this and change it. This is for Ace. This is a basic inventory loadout. So essentially, when this init player local script runs, these objects will be added to the uniform of every player unit because there's no modifier on this. So if you are a player unit, these things will be added to your inventory. So what this essentially does for me is it means I will always have exactly what I want in my inventory for my players, which I always have the same loadout. I always have bandages, basic medical supplies, maybe a couple of smoke grenades or grenades, stuff like that. Obviously, you can modify that, but I always want a basic loadout in the uniform slot, and then everything else, like backpack and vest, depending on the class, I'll get into that after, will have, that's where I'll give them ammo, I'll give them other equipment. But I want the uniform to always have the same exact amount of equipment, and so this script essentially does that for me. Because it's only running on player local, that means that this will not, for example, if you put this in the init regular, this would run for every time someone runs the init, meaning all of this stuff would be added to every player every time someone joins or connects, meaning you would have like a way more stuff added. So what this does is it only runs once you join into the game, and it'll only run on your uniform. Generally, I think that's how it works. I've tested it, seems to work fine. So that's how it works. So essentially what would happen to set this up in game, if I go to here, I would have to, in order to make sure there's room for all that stuff, all I have to do, go to uniform, empty, and then I don't have to worry about adding medical supplies because all of that is taken care of for me. Once this player gets in, which I can actually, I'll test that right now. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna get rid of the crop on this because I don't really care if you see my fucking screen. Whatever, fuck it. Just makes it easier for me, right? Okay, so I get in. Okay, yeah. So I get in game. This crop is not. There we go. All right, that's just the video thing. But I go. So if I go to play multiplayer, and then I select. I'm going to edit this little bit out. We'll see. And then I go in game. Just wait for it to load. This is giving me an error. You can ignore this in single player or multiplayer or whatever because this will run at the start. All it means is that it can't detect Squad Leader 2. It doesn't really affect anything. I'll go into the Rallypoint system after. But, okay, so I'm in game. Now I can check my inventory. Look at that. I have all that equipment that I needed in my basic loadout. My vest can have whatever I want for other stuff, and then yeah. So that's exactly as I intended. So okay, so if we're going to mission setup now. So that's what this section is in player local does. So the next part, if vehicle variable player MGA_1. This would be my machine gunner assistant. So if I named them MGA1, what this would do is remove weapon binocular and add weapon rangefinder. So essentially how this works, if they don't have a binocular, this remove binocular would do nothing. However, it would add weapon rangefinder. So what I want is my machine gunner assistants, because they're supposed to be spotting for the machine gunner and carrying their ammo. They will always have a rangefinder, which allows them to better spot for the machine gunner. Another thing that I'll show you in the editor that I do with the machine gunner, this isn't the machine gunner obviously, but if we go to edit loadout, or not edit loadout, go to the attributes, go down to ACE options, I will also give the machine gunner assistant and AT assistant and stuff, I'll give them a 1.2 performance factor, which kind of incentivizes players to take the heavier equipment roles because, otherwise they kind of get the shit under the stick and no one wants to play the auto rifleman assistant. But kind of a thankless job, but that gives some more incentive. Anyways, that's what I do for that. So that's what this would do. So it checks if you are MGA1, and then it runs this script. If you are not MGA1, it will do nothing. So that's kind of the ideal. And so meaning if there is no player named MGA1, then it will not run this. So next up is SN1. So this would be the sniper named SN1. What this does is remove weapon binocular, add weapon rangefinder, which is obviously self-explanatory. Also adds item to vest, range card. So I want a like a sniper's range card for, you know, calculating shots and stuff. Next thing, this would be for the medics. So this is a bit more complicated, but it's essentially the same thing. If it detects if you're named MD1 or MD2, it will then add all of this stuff to your backpack. So for the medic role, then I would want to ensure. So you can also add stuff. Obviously, with a backpack, you have a lot more room. I can empty this as long as there's enough room for that stuff to get added. It's fine. I could also add a little bit of extra stuff if I wanted, but the basic loadout, you know, if I have, as long as there's enough room, it'll spawn this stuff in the backpack. So it will add in 30 packing bandages. Keep in mind, I don't use advanced bandages, so these do the same as any other bandage, meaning, you know, if you're using a advanced bandage system, you'll probably want a more variety of bandages. So you'll have to look up the class names, and you'll have to, you know, do this little thing here for I from 1 to 32. That just means it'll be adding 30 bandages. And then so next up, we have 12 morphine, 12 epinephrine. Next up, we have 6 adenosine and 6 splints. And then we have, sorry, then we have 4 saline 500 bags. Then we have 3 saline 1000 bags and 3 tourniquets. Also 1 personal aid kit. So that's what's added to the, whoops. That's what's added to the, the medic roll. So that's pretty much self-explanatory for that. Next up is for the squad leader role. So similar thing, we're adding a 152 radio, which is a, so actually, I guess the script will give you an error if you don't have Acre installed. So keep that in mind. If you're not using Acre, you're going to want to delete this PRC 152, because I think that may break the script for the squad leader. So, yeah, essentially, you know, what this would add a squad level radio to the squad leader and also the team leader, which would be SL2. And then it would also add a micro dagger, which is an ACE GPS, and it would also link item, which is adding a GPS to the GPS slot. So that's what Init Player Local does. Kind of long-winded, but I'll add a chapter for this if you want to skip it. So that's what that does. These are the modifications I've done. Essentially, it means I don't have to do as much setup. As long as I make sure inventories are empty where they need to be, and all this stuff gets spawned in correctly, it saves quite a bit of time going through the loadouts, and all I have to worry about is setting them up with ammo and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what Init Player Local does. So let's go back to this. Init. The only thing I have in here, so you can also put other stuff, obviously, like in the last one, I think I had some other stuff you could put in here, but all I'm doing for this one is scripts / rallypoint.sqf. So I have a new scripts folder I use just to be a little more organized, which would be in here. So under scripts, you can actually ignore these other, I may delete these when I upload this. You don't need these because I'm not really using them. But all you need to worry about is rallypoint.sqf. So I'll show you what's going on in here. So ChatGPT really helped me with this. Keep in mind, though, that because ChatGPT helped me with this, there may be problems with it. So far in testing, I haven't found any, but there may be, you know, something involved with, like, you know, maybe it's checking too often conditions and stuff, which could cause server lag if it's checking conditions too much or stuff like that. But as far as I know, it's doing pretty well, this script. So I'll kind of go through what it does in case you want to modify it. Maybe you'll understand it a bit better. Create Rallypoint trigger. What this does is it creates a trigger. Well, this actually creates the trigger, and this names it RP Trig 1. So if you remember, that was what I called the trig before. So the trigger will be called RP Trig 1. It has all these conditions in because this is a script spawning of a trigger. Essentially, it's exactly the same as a regular trigger. It just has all this stuff in different positions. So it will create an empty detector, get pause RP1 true. So it will create the trigger at RP1. Next up is set trigger area, which is 25 by 25. False, I think that I don't remember exactly what that means, but you can look up these commands and it'll tell you exactly what these individual numbers and stuff will mean. So radius of 25 meters. Set trigger activation. So quotations GR, present, true, and then adjust. This will adjust resistance to the desired faction, blah, blah, blah. ChatGPT wrote that, but yeah, but essentially, you're going to, actually, it should be GR, not resistance. So, trigger activation, GR, which is independent forces. Present true, meaning that I think it's true is repeatable. Or no, this makes it repeatable. I'm not sure what this does. Anyways, the trigger activation will be activated by gorillas being present. So you can change this to west, whatever. This is, by the way, this is the overrun script. So once gorillas are present for 10 seconds, and this is repeatable, the rally point will be overrun. It'll run this script here, which this script is trigger statements. It'll run a hint that says the rally point is overrun. It will RP1, which is the rally point, which would be your ammo box, which is actually, the way I've modified it is so RP1 is no longer connected to the respawn marker and trigger. These are all moved at the same time to the same location, because I was having troubles before where the RP1 would not sync properly with other players, so we would have delays between when the actual object was moved, meaning that we had weird things where the respawn, you would respawn in the wrong position, essentially. You'd respawn in the old position when you should be respawning in the new one. So now everything's moved independently, meaning RP1 is set to marker position player base, respawn east is set marker position to player base, and RP trig is set position to player base. They're not connected anymore. So that means that you can't manually move that box in Zeus and then the respawn marker will move there. You're gonna have to get creative by running a script to move the marker wherever you want. Anyways, once overrun, that will happen. It'll move all this stuff to the marker named player base. Next up, RP trig equals call create rally point trigger, meaning it will create a trigger named RP trig. Next up is deploying the rally point. So this is a ACE action. So deploy rally point equals params target, get number of allies within 15 meters of the target, allies nearby equals target near entities man 15, meaning how many men are within 15 meters. If the count of the allies is greater than 1, you can also set this to 0 to disable it. Then it will run the script, which will say rally point deployed. It will get the position of the target, which would be the player. It would move RP1. This is all doing through a remote exec, by the way, so this is updating to everyone across the server at the same time, which is important to do remote exec for certain things like this. So it will then move RP1 to the player position, which is referenced here, _pause. It will then move RP trig to the player position, and it will move respawn east to the player position, meaning when you run the rally point script, it'll say rally point deployed, and all that stuff will move to you. Including the trigger, which if there are enemies near the trigger or whatever, it will then move all that stuff back to player base. So yeah. Else, it will say a hint, need more allies nearby to deploy rally point. So if you have this set to 1 or greater, essentially if you don't have people near you, which also includes enemies actually, keep in mind. So I haven't found a better way to do it where you are also counting not only allies, but essentially if there are any men near you, units, then it'll say, you can deploy. Otherwise, if there's not enough or if it's not disabled, then it'll say need more allies nearby to deploy rally point. So yeah, so this is the actual action. So this is the action being added to the player. So all this is essentially the same. Only difference is it's adding the action based on this right here. So for _x and then for each persist 1. So all of this stuff is being done for persist 1. And then all this stuff is being done for SL2. So it's adding an action to SL2 and persist 1. That's why you get an error at the start if SL2 or persist 1 isn't run, that it can't deploy the script to them. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't affect anything negatively, other than that's obviously not possible. So you would have to run this rally point SQF again if for some reason you lose that rally point marker. But yeah, it works as far as I've tested. So I've kind of gone over all that. That was a little long-winded, longer than I thought, but yeah. Next up, so save that. That's the rally point. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's everything, isn't it? Yeah, I haven't changed anything else. So that's the rally point system. Modify it as you want, obviously. All right, so I'm gonna load the next mission, which will be in my 95 setup, no ACE. So I've disabled the ACE mod, and also I have, so I only have 3 enhanced, and I also have CBA loaded. So if anything doesn't work, it's because you don't have those mods. But so essentially it's the same thing. We have game master, we have rally point, we have player base, we have RP1, and we have headless client. We don't need headless client, but you get the point. So we have persist 1. So what I have here is this little script here called this add action set rally point scripts Rallypoint No ACE. So essentially everything is the same here, although I will go to my 95% No ACE folder. So I've deleted some stuff. So init player local only has the markers now. It doesn't have any of that ACE equipment adding stuff. So init has nothing because I don't need to run the script there. I'm running the script on the add action. So essentially what this does is once that action is used, it will run Rallypoint No ACE, which what this does is sets the position of the player. So, you know, the position of the player will... Now, keep in mind, I have not tested this on multiplayer. I'm just making this as a starter point for you. So if this doesn't work for whatever reason, you may need to do some testing and modify it a bit. I may be able to help a little bit if you can't figure it out. But I'd say just Google, use ChatGPT, ask questions on forums and stuff. You can find your way around scripting pretty easily, even if you have zero knowledge like I do. Anyways, so position, get pause player. I could see this being an issue if it's for some reason getting the position of a player who's not the guy who's running it, but I think this should be fine. And then it'll be checking the... So this is to make sure it doesn't run on all people. It's only running on if variable name player is persist1 or SL2. Meaning if your variable name is persist1 or SL2, it will run the script. If you're running this action and you're not variable named that, or whatever you place here, it will not run. In theory, at least. So, haven't tested this, but that's how it should work. Next up, it's the same exact script that's in that other ACE one. It will move the RP1 to the player position. It will move RP trig to the player position, and it will move respawn east to the player position. And that's all this does. It's pretty basic. It doesn't have that script, the rally or the trigger in the script, so I have to manually make the trigger. So I just call it RP trig, set blue for present or whatever faction. Then I have the exact same script here, hint RP1, so it moves all the stuff to player base. So yeah, essentially that's it. I will show you how this works in game just to give just to make sure it's working, which I have tested it. So set player. And this has been tested on a dedicated with some of my players, so I'm pretty sure all of this should work, except for this this one, with the non-ACE version, which is untested. You may have to modify it. So I run a bit over here, run a set rally point, and there we go. We have the object, we have the marker. I just proved that it's moving. Has moved the rally point, so the trigger is also being moved. So yeah, so you have a regular action. One thing to keep in mind, when you die, you may lose this action. So I haven't really worked out how to fix that, because ACE automatically will keep the action on your player when you respawn. But I think a way to fix that would be you would just set up a script for on-player respawn that would run this add action again, if for whatever reason it doesn't add again. So if that's an issue, that may be something to look into. Anyways, spent enough time on this video. Hopefully this is helpful to you. Any questions, feel free to shoot away in the chat. I'll try to help out when possible. Other videos are on the way. I have some stuff planned. So, yeah, let me know if you want to see more of these tutorial videos. I'm kind of just showing how I do stuff as I learn. You know, this is obviously a bit of a revamp from my previous thing. I'm also thinking I might do a tutorial on HAL and R6 because I have been using Alive still, but I've also been using other mods like HAL and R6 on Drongo's map population. Basically other dynamic mission mods, and yeah, they're pretty cool. So I have some other plans to make some tutorials on that. So in the future, more tutorials. I also have some other non-tutorial videos planned, even though, you know, it's been a long while since one of those. But yeah, it'll happen when it happens. Hopefully I've fixed the audio a bit. I've kind of worked on some stuff to make my audio a bit better. So hopefully that sounds better. Other than that, thanks for watching. Please subscribe or whatever, and yeah, have a good one. So yeah.